Saludos, this is Gabe Morales coming here once again for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians. Today we're going to discuss a capture of a famous drug lord, Rafael Caro-Quintero. On July 16, 2022, Mexican and U.S. authorities announced the capture of the famous drug lord. It was the biggest capture since Chapo Guzman, who was also a long sought-after drug lord from Sinaloa, who was arrested, extradited, put on trial, and currently resides in the ADX in Florence, Colorado. Caro-Quintero was a key figure in the death of DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena in 1985. I remember this occurring because I was stationed in Okinawa in the Marine Corps at the time, and I even thought about becoming a DEA agent since I had some personal experience working in the drug world. I'll bet in no comparison to Caro-Quintero. I do remember back in the late 1970s and early 80s, though, when Sin Semilla marijuana came out. This is marijuana that has no seeds, and it was considered very potent. I remember at the time people were smoking it, and before, where they were smoking 4 or 5 joints, they were just taking 1 or 2 hits of the Sin Semilla since the THC was so powerful. It was the talk all over Seattle, where I lived at the time. Mike Villa, who's the head of DEA International Operations and appeared with me on the Aryan Brotherhood special, said that it was his hope that with the capture of Caro-Quintero, that it would mend a lot of the tensions between Mexico and the U.S. Let's go back over time to discuss a little bit of Mexican-U.S. relations as far as drug lords are concerned. Caro-Quintero was just a long list of characters who were considered bad guys by the U.S., but often viewed as heroes by the poor in Mexico. As I covered in my book, How We Lost the Drug War, Pancho Villa was a main character in the Mexican Revolution that took place between 1910 and 1925. Villa was a bandit as a young man in the state of Durango, which is located in northern Mexico, and it is located within the Golden Triangle of Mexico, where many of the drug lords are from over the past 100 years. There is a very famous song that came out when Pancho Villa's around called La Cucaracha. It basically was a corrido, or Mexican narrative folk song, about him and his car. Well, a lot of times people saw him on horses. Most of the time, Pancho Villa rode an old Model T Ford that would often backfire. It was named La Cucaracha. The song goes like this: La cucaracha, ya no puedo caminar, porque no tiene, porque le falta marihuana que fumar. Gotta give a little grito at the end, you know what I mean? Basically, that was talking about him smuggling marijuana to the United States. That's how he made a lot of his money to fund his war. It was going on before Pancho Villa, and it's been going on ever since. Pancho Villa died in an assassination, likely with the approval of Mexican President Alvaro Obregón, who was in office at the time, and considered Villa a rival. Villa was driving in a 1919 Dodge touring car when he was assassinated in the city of Parral, Chihuahua, Mexico. Juan Guerra Cárdenas was a longtime crime lord who was born during Villa's heyday. Like I said, while we consider them bad guys, Villa was considered a hero in many parts, even though he was a known bandit. Guerra Cárdenas founded a group that later on became the Gulf Cartel, and he's considered the godfather of modern-day cartels. Guerra Cárdenas smuggled drugs and alcohol. After Prohibition was lifted in the U.S. in 1933, he diversified and increased his drug business. Guerra Cárdenas died in 2001, and during his whole life, he never spent more than a few hours in a jail cell. He knew how to corrupt officials in what they call la mordida, the bribe. This is something that's been going on in Mexico for decades and continues till this very day. Guerra Cárdenas' nephew, Juan Garcia Abrego, took over the business in the 1970s. The Garcia Abrego organization developed into what we now know as the Gulf Cartel, although that has changed many times since, and the Gulf Cartel is very fractured today. It was well known that Garcia Abrego bribed Mexican officials, and we're talking millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars. But eventually his luck ran out. In 1996, he was captured in Monterrey, Nuevo León, and extradited to the United States. He was put on trial, convicted, and he's still incarcerated in the Bureau of Prisons in Hazleton, West Virginia, to this date, and is 77 years old. But Garcia Abrego was just one of many Mexican drug lords. As soon as one is taken down, another one pops up. It all comes down to supply and demand. I will cover more on Mexican drug lords in future episodes, but for now, let me get back to Caro-Quintero. I've heard some say in the YouTube world that the word cartel did not even exist in the 1990s. This simply is not true. It was first used to describe German railroad companies way back in the mid-1800s who had taken over the business. Some of you might remember also way back in the 1970s when there was the Arab oil embargo, they were referred to cartels back then, just oil cartels, not drug cartels. At the same time that Juan Garcia Obrego took over the Gulf cartel from his tío, cartels were developing all over Mexico, including the Guadalajara cartel, led by Miguel Ángel El Padrino Felix Gallardo, and his business partners, Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, and another guy named Rafael Caro-Quintero. They are the most well-known Guadalajara cartel, but there actually was another one led by the Mexican Drug brothers who got into methamphetamine. That actually took off bigger than anybody ever realized at the time. The Mexican Drug brothers exploited worldwide legitimate chemical companies to make their product. I remember back in the 70s at the time, the only people really into methamphetamine were white biker gangs, and they moved that product to the United States, and some of them even had their own labs. This is the first time I heard the term tweaker, as it would often make people twitch and act erratically when they used it, and it made them stay up all night, even for days. Meanwhile, Felix Gallardo, Fonseca Carrillo, and Caro-Quintero focused on marijuana, which was used by a lot more people in the United States. And like I said, when Sin Semilla came out, their product was known as some of the best out there. All three of these individuals were eventually convicted in the capture, torture, and death of DEA agent Kiki Camarena, who was killed in February 1985. Camarena was kidnapped outside the U.S. consulate in Guadalajara in the state of Jalisco in Mexico. He had already bested some of their large marijuana fields and growing operations, and they were very angry about this. According to some of them, they only intended to interrogate the DEA agent, not kill him. But obviously, he died, as well as another individual who was with him. Camarena's body was later found in a shallow hole in the state of Michoacán, Mexico. Under extreme pressure from the U.S. government, Fonseca Carrillo and Caro-Quintero were arrested in April 1985. This was barely 2 months after Enrique Camarena's body was found. And so this was considered a very fast arrest compared to usual circumstances. But like I said, the U.S. put extreme pressure on Mexico, and I'm sure they promised the Mexican president and police forces lots of money for their cooperation. Felix Gallardo, the other part of the trio in this Guadalajara cartel, went on the run and hung low at ranchos he owned and at friends' mansions. After his arrest in 1989, many people allege that he actually was hiding out as a guest of the governor of Jalisco, Antonio Toledo Coro. Before he was arrested, Felix Gallardo ordered his lawyer to call up a meeting of all the Mexican drug lords, and they divided up the country. And these are the cartels that came about later, although, like I said, just like the Gulf cartel, many of them have since splintered into various subcartels. And today, there is a new group that is one of the most powerful called the Cartel Jalisco Nuevo Generación, led by Mencho, who we'll cover in a future episode. Rafael, or Rafa as he is known to many of his friends, was put in a Mexican prison, but freed by a judge in 2013, and he immediately went on the run. U.S. authorities were outraged by this revelation, and the Mexican government immediately put out a warrant. But he survived on the run for almost 10 years, I'm sure with the assistance of many political friends. The U.S. put up a $20 million reward for the capture of Rafa, and hopefully he is not let out or allowed to escape, like Chapo Guzman did. During the capture of Caro-Quintero, many Mexican Marines were killed, in the picture you see in the background behind me. When a helicopter crashed, the constantly changing leadership of Mexican cartels will likely go on. It has since the days of Pancho Villa, Chapo Guzman, and many others. Caro-Quintero is just one in a long list of Mexican drug lords that we'll capture in future episodes. A lot of people have asked me to go live on episodes, so I didn't do it live, but I recorded me narrating this and added a few historical pictures. I may do this format in the future. Let me know if you like this or you're tired of seeing my ugly mug. Also, stay tuned for 2 episodes to be released soon in Spanish by 2 friends of mine who were high-ranking comandantes, who will talk a little bit more about their work and the work of the many brave men and women who are not corrupted by La Mordida, who are professionals. There are some out there, and we should be supporting them in their efforts. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.